Well, Mr. Powell's saying over and over, inflation's transitory. Guess what? Both sides of the aisle aren't buying it. Let's discuss it.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound.
It is going to be more and more difficult to argue that rising inflation is transitory. Mr. Powell has been saying over and over again that inflation is transitory. So when a federal moratorium on evictions expires at the end of July, some 10 million households are at risk of being evicted, notwithstanding any last-minute state or federal efforts to protect tenants. You know the state of California would do that. They're a tenant-friendly state. The program's end brings a fallout for tenants and relief for landlords that will ripple across the U.S. economy, unleashing a new upside risk for inflation as broad pricing pressures boil and inflation expectations climb. Landlords are hurting right now, and it's time we give them some relief. A large percentage of people have been taking advantage of the eviction moratorium. Enough is enough. So, look at this chart. We look at spring 2020, rent prices fell. Winter 2021, rent prices rebounded a little bit. So what will happen if we get locked down again? That will be a disaster on both sides, in my opinion. If you take a look at this chart, you can see Boise, Idaho is still going strong and is showing the largest rent increase in country at 39%, followed by Spokane, Washington at 31%, and coming in at number 3, Fresno coming in at plus 21%. So weekly data from the U.S. Census Bureau shows about 15% of people in renter-occupied housing units are behind on rent payments. That's double pre-pandemic levels according to the National Equity Atlas, a partnership between the Research Institute Policy Link and the University of Southern California. So roughly 1 in 4 of about 51 million households surveyed said they have no confidence or only slight confidence that they will make next month's rent payment. Evictions are hard to track. The U.S. government doesn't collect such data, nor do most state governments. But data from Princeton University Eviction Lab shows landlords file roughly about 3.7 million eviction cases in a typical year. So that provides some context to the scope of the coming eviction wave. Rob Stevenson, head of real estate equity research at Janney Montgomery Scott, says many landlords have already written off the unpaid rent, but he says a boost may be coming for real estate investment trusts such as Avalon Bay Commodities, Camden Property Trust, Apartment Income, and Essex Property Trust, as they have an opportunity to replace delinquent tenants with new occupants at higher rent rates. Fantastic. So already he says apartment rents in coastal markets hardest hit in 2020 are up about 4.2% from earlier this year as vaccinated Americans and people becoming more confident in general return to norms, including city life. Rent inflation was running hot before the pandemic, rising about 3.4 clip immediately before the lockdowns. That rents have been rising about 2% annual pace, even as evictions are on hold, speaks to bubbling pressure as wages rise, mobility increases due to vaccinations and people's confidence, and reopenings and unit occupancy rates fall. So those forces are set to collide with an indirect boost from surging home prices, just as effective cap on rents from the eviction moratorium expires. So housing prices tend to lead rents by about 12 to 18 months, says Citigroup economist Victoria Clark. I agree with that, given that home prices started to balloon at the start of the pandemic. That impact on rents is imminent. It's also not slowing down. A report from the National Association of Realtors this past week showed that the median price of a previously owned home hit a new high in June, up 1.4%. from May to 363,300. That's, as the Census Bureau reported, a drop in building permits, an indicator of future housing supply to the lowest levels since October. So Clark expects housing demand to remain strong into at least the next year, translating to a knock on upward effect for rents into at least 2023. Shelter inflation is the most persistent kind, she says, meaning an ongoing acceleration in rent prices will make it increasingly hard for central bankers and others to say inflation is in fact transitory. This doesn't mean the Federal Reserve won't still argue inflation is fleeting when its policy meeting concludes this coming Wednesday, but it may mean officials are going to have a tougher time convincing investors that they are right, with 10 million people facing eviction and roughly 2.7 to 3 million homes in forbearance. But hey, don't worry. Don't worry. The housing market's on solid ground, 100%. So that's true. So you have the rental moratorium, the government has intervened, and you have 2.7 to 3 million homes. Some say as low as 2-3. It's almost 3 million from internal data that I can see are in forbearance. People haven't made payments in 18 months. Those payments are going to have to be refactored in a loan. It's not going to be forgiven, just like in 2008 when they were going to help out people that were going to be foreclosed on. The government double dipped and picked up those homes. So it's very shaky ground right now. If you had 860,000 homes foreclosed in 2008, can you imagine if 3 million homes in forbearance just hit the market and say, we're not going to help you out, you're going to have to foreclose? So is that a healthy housing market? You tell me. 10 million people can't pay their rents. People aren't paying their mortgages, almost 3 million. So think about that, 860,000 homes foreclosed in the last housing crisis. What would happen if 3 million homes hit the market tomorrow? It'd be worse than 2008. So we have a lot of factors and going on right here with this market, and federal government is coming back and saying inflation is transitory when we're looking at commodities and prices and gas going through the roof. Okay, so I've been talking about inflation for almost a year. So it's there, and you can't call it transitory. So it's something we need to be concerned about, and we'll see what happens with this eviction moratorium. But landlords, they're writing off some of their debt. We're able to do that. Like I said, I have 12% of tenants not paying. Things are picking up, but we need to get the economy humming again to help both sides of this crisis. Thanks for your time. Take care. Be creative.